My sister married my ex-husband, and she laughed as he tormented me and took all my money in the divorce. Last month, she showed up at my door, begging me to save her from him. She was shocked to see how rich I am now. The rain started the moment she appeared on my doorstep. I wish I could tell you I didn't recognize her at first, that the years had changed her so completely that my own sister had become a stranger. But that would be a lie, and I've spent too long telling myself lies about Claire to add another one now. I knew it was her before I even opened the door. Knew it in the way you know certain things, the particular rhythm of her knock, 3 fast taps followed by 1 slow one, the same pattern she'd used when we shared a bedroom growing up, and she needed to wake me without alerting our parents. Some memories live in your body. They don't ask permission to surface. I was in the middle of reviewing contracts for the Sullivan acquisition when the knock came. My home office overlooks the front drive, a deliberate choice, one of many I've made over the years to ensure I'm never caught off guard again. I saw the headlights first, some old sedan I didn't recognize, then the figure emerging into the security lights. She was thinner than I remembered, hunched against the October wind in a coat that looked too large for her. For one disorienting moment, I saw our mother, the same defeated angle of the shoulders, the same way she seemed to fold in on herself against the cold. And then I saw the bruise. Even from the second floor, even through the rain-streaked window, I could see the dark shadow along her left cheekbone, the swelling near her eye. My phone was in my hand. I could have called security, could have watched through the window as they escorted her off my property, could have poured myself another glass of wine and gone back to the Sullivan contracts, back to the life I'd built from the ashes of the one she helped burn down. But you have to understand something about sisters, about Claire, about the 29 years before she married my husband. Let me start at the beginning. I was 7 when Claire was born, 7 years old, already convinced I was an only child forever, already settled into the rhythms of a household that revolved around my parents' moods and my own quiet existence. And then, suddenly, there was this screaming, red-faced creature in the room that used to be my father's study, and nothing was ever the same again. Our mother called her a miracle, called her the baby they'd given up hoping for. I remember standing in the doorway of the nursery, formerly the study, now painted a pale pink that made me vaguely nauseous, watching my mother rock this tiny stranger and feeling something I wouldn't have words for until much later. Displacement. That's what the therapist would call it, years down the road. The experience of being moved from the center of your world to its periphery, all because of circumstances beyond your control. But here's the thing about Claire. She was impossible to hate. Even when she screamed through the night and I couldn't sleep, even when every conversation at the dinner table became about her first smile, her first word, her first steps, even when my 7th birthday party was cut short because she had a fever, and my mother was convinced it was something serious, even though it never was. Claire was beautiful in the way some babies are, the way that makes strangers stop strollers in grocery stores. Round eyes that seemed too large for her face, perfect rosebud mouth, wispy golden hair that would eventually darken to a honeyed brown. She looked like a doll, and she behaved like one too, content to be passed from arms to arms, delighted by the simplest attentions. I became her protector without deciding to. That's the thing people don't understand about older siblings, especially sisters. The love isn't a choice, it's a condition. It settles into your bones before you're old enough to question it, and by the time you realize how heavy it is, you've been carrying it so long you don't know how to put it down. By the time I was 10 and Claire was 3, I was already covering for her, already explaining to my mother that the broken vase was my fault, that I was the one who'd taken cookies from the jar, that the crayon on the living room wall was my artistic expression, and not the work of a toddler who'd wandered unsupervised for 10 minutes. By the time I was 15 and Claire was 8, I was already fighting her battles, the mean girls at school who mocked her hand-me-down clothes. I spent my babysitting money on new sneakers for her. The boy who pulled her hair at recess, I found him after school and made very clear what would happen if he touched her again. The teacher who called her stupid in front of the class, I requested a meeting with the principal, a terrifying act of assertion for a naturally quiet teenager. By the time I was 22 and Claire was 15, I was already sacrificing. My first serious boyfriend wanted me to move across the country with him, San Francisco, a real apartment, a real life, away from the small town where everyone knew everyone and nothing ever changed. I wanted to go. God, I wanted to go so badly I could taste it. The salt of the Pacific, the fog rolling through those famous hills, the anonymity of a city where I could become anyone I wanted to. But Claire was struggling. Our father had left by then, moved in with his secretary like some terrible cliché, and our mother had crawled into a bottle she showed no signs of emerging from. Claire was failing classes, running with older kids, staying out past curfew, coming home smelling of cigarettes and desperation. I couldn't leave her, so I stayed. This is what you need to understand about me, about who I was for the first 35 years of my life. I was the one who stayed, the one who sacrificed, the one who put everyone else's needs before my own, not out of nobility, but out of some bone-deep inability to prioritize myself. It's not a virtue. My therapist has made that abundantly clear over the years. It's a wound that looks like a gift, and wounds left untreated tend to fester. I met Daniel at Claire's 21st birthday party. That's a detail most people find significant when I tell this story, that he was there for her, not for me. But at the time, it didn't register as a red flag. Daniel was a friend of a friend, someone's law school classmate, just a name on a long list of people helping Claire celebrate reaching an age she seemed at various dark points unlikely to reach. She'd gotten better, you see. After a rocky few years, she'd stabilized. Community college, then state school, then a decent job in a marketing firm in the city. She was beautiful in the way she'd always been beautiful. That doll-like quality, refined into something more sophisticated. Cheekbones and cat eyes, and a laugh that made people lean closer. I was 31 that year, established in my career as an accountant, not glamorous but stable, living in a 2-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood, dating occasionally, nothing serious. I'd made peace with the idea that my life would be quieter than I'd once imagined. Some people blaze, some people glow. I was the glow type, and that was fine. And then Daniel walked up to me at the bar and said, "You look like you're calculating everyone's tax liability in your head." I should have said something witty, something that matched his energy. He was clearly the type who expected banter, who spoke in clever volleys and wanted them returned. But I was 2 glasses of wine and genuinely surprised that someone who looked like Daniel was talking to someone who looked like me. Because that's the thing about Daniel that I need you to understand. He was handsome in a way that felt almost aggressive. Dark hair, sharp jaw, eyes that seemed to see through whatever facade you'd put up that day. He was tall, broad-shouldered, immaculately dressed in a way that suggested old money or very careful curation. When he smiled, it was like being granted access to an exclusive club. "I was wondering why there's an open bar for a 21-year-old's birthday party," I said. "That seems like asking for trouble." "The birthday girl's sister is an accountant. I hear she's very responsible," he said. "How do you know I'm her sister?" I blinked. "You've been watching her all night." He gestured with his glass toward Claire, who was currently holding court near the DJ booth, laughing at something a man I didn't recognize was saying. With that very specific expression, pride and worry in equal measure. Only sisters look at each other like that. Or mothers. "You're not old enough to be her mother." "Older than I look." He leaned against the bar, studying me with those 2 perceptive eyes. "No, I don't think you are," he said. We talked for 3 hours that night. Then he asked for my number. Then he called the next day, a breach of dating protocol that felt refreshingly direct. Our first date was dinner at a restaurant I couldn't afford. He paid without making it a thing. Our second date was a movie I picked. He held my hand in the dark without asking permission, and I let him. 3 months later, he told me he loved me. 6 months after that, he proposed. And I said yes. Of course I said yes, because Daniel made me feel like I was finally being seen, not as Claire's responsible sister, not as the dependable accountant, not as the woman who stayed behind when everyone else left. He made me feel like I was the destination, not the rest stop. I didn't know then that destinations can be prisons too. The wedding was small, my choice. I've never liked being the center of attention, and the thought of walking down an aisle with hundreds of eyes on me made my skin crawl. Daniel had pushed for something larger, something befitting his family's social standing, but ultimately deferred to my wishes. "Anything you want," he said, kissing my forehead in that way he had. "I just want you to be happy." I should have noticed how easily he capitulated. Should have asked myself why a man who had opinions about everything, from the thread count of our sheets to the brand of coffee we drank, would suddenly become so agreeable about his own wedding. But I was in love, and in love means temporarily blind to the patterns that will later seem so obvious. Claire was my maid of honor. She stood beside me in a pale green dress that made her eyes look like sea glass. And when I turned to face Daniel at the altar, I caught her watching him with an expression I couldn't quite read. "He's so lucky," she whispered to me during the reception, when Daniel was across the room accepting congratulations from his law school friends. "You're going to make him so happy." "I hope so." "You will." Her hand found mine and squeezed. "You always take care of everyone. It's your superpower." I hugged her then, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume, something floral and expensive, a gift from a boyfriend she'd recently stopped seeing. I felt in that moment like everything I'd worked for was finally coming together. The good job, the good man, the sister who loved me. It's strange, looking back, how complete I felt, how certain I was that I'd arrived at the life I was meant to live. I keep that memory locked away now, not because it hurts, though it does, but because I need to remember what it felt like to be that naive, to believe that loving someone, that sacrificing for them, would keep you safe. It doesn't. It just makes you easier to hurt. The first year of marriage was exactly what I'd expected. Happy, in a quiet, steady way. Daniel worked long hours at his firm. He was up for partner, he said, and the competition was fierce. I worked my own long hours, climbing the ladder at the accounting firm that had hired me straight out of school. We were ships passing in the night, but when we did pass, it was with genuine affection. He brought me flowers for no reason. I made his favorite dinners when I could. We fell asleep tangled together and woke up reaching for each other. It was good, normal, the kind of marriage that doesn't make for interesting stories because nothing dramatic happens. But something shifted in the second year. It happened so gradually that I didn't notice at first. Small comments, easily dismissed. "You're wearing that?" followed by a quick smile and a "just kidding, you look great." Suggestions about my weight, framed as concern for my health. Observations about my friends. Weren't they kind of boring? Didn't they bring out a version of me that was less interesting than the version he'd fallen in love with? I started second-guessing myself, started checking the mirror 3 times before leaving the house, started declining invitations from friends because it wasn't worth the subtle tension it would create when I came home. And then Claire got laid off. She called me crying that spring from a bar somewhere downtown. The marketing firm was downsizing. She was out of job, out of money, about to be out of her apartment. "Can I stay with you?" she asked. "Just for a few weeks, until I figure things out." I didn't hesitate. Of course. Daniel hesitated when I told him, just for a second, just long enough for me to notice. But then he smiled that generous smile and said, "Family first, she can take the guest room." Claire moved in the next day, and that's when everything started to unravel. I told myself later that there must have been signs I missed, glances between them when they thought I wasn't looking, text messages at odd hours, the way the energy in a room shifted when all 3 of us were in it, like an electrical current I couldn't quite trace to its source. But the truth is, I trusted them both completely. It never occurred to me, not once, not even as a fleeting paranoid thought in the middle of the night, that my husband and my sister might be anything more than in-laws learning to tolerate each other. Trust is like that. It doesn't protect you. It just makes the fall farther. I remember the last normal night. We'd ordered Thai food and were watching some reality show Claire loved. She was curled up on the armchair, I was on the couch with Daniel, and everything felt peaceful and domestic and right. At one point, Claire excused herself to take a phone call. "Work stuff," she said, even though she was still unemployed. Daniel's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it, smiled slightly, and tucked it away without responding. "Who was that?" I asked, not suspiciously, just making conversation. "Work," he said. "Always work." And I believed him. Because why wouldn't I believe him? He was my husband, she was my sister, and I was the woman who stayed, the woman who trusted, the woman who had spent 35 years building a life on the foundation of other people's reliability. I didn't know yet that foundations can crack, that the people you trust most are the ones who can break you most completely, that the life I thought I had was a sandcastle waiting for the tide. The rain continues falling outside as I watch my sister through the window. She hasn't knocked a second time. She's just standing there, shivering, looking up at the house I built with money she never thought I'd have. And I'm still trying to decide whether to let her in. Claire's few weeks stretched into 2 months. I didn't mind, not really. I'd spent my whole life making room for her, and it felt almost natural to come home and find her curled up on the couch, or hear her singing in the shower, or trip over her shoes in the hallway. The house felt more alive with her in it. What I did mind, though I couldn't quite articulate it at the time, was how my marriage seemed to contract around her presence. Daniel, who had been working late most nights, started coming home earlier. He said it was because he'd made partner, finally, after years of grueling competition, and his schedule was more flexible now. But something about the timing felt off. He'd walked through the door at 7, sometimes earlier, and instead of collapsing on the couch like he used to, he'd be energized, talkative, wanting to order dinner or watch a movie or play a board game. And Claire was always there. "Your sister's actually pretty funny," he said one night after she'd gone to bed. We were cleaning up the kitchen together, side by side at the sink. I said she was always funny. "No, I know, but—" He paused, searching for words. "I guess I'd only ever seen her at family stuff, you know, when she was on her best behavior. Living with someone, you see who they really are." I scrubbed at a stubborn spot on a pan. "And who is she, really?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Complicated. More complicated than I thought." I should have asked what he meant, should have pushed, interrogated, demanded specifics. But I was tired from work, and the pan wasn't coming clean, and part of me didn't want to have a deep conversation about my sister's complexity with my husband. "She's been through a lot," I said finally. "She had a hard time after our dad left." He told me. Something in his voice made me look up. He was drying a glass, but his eyes were distant, like he was thinking about something he didn't want to share. "When did she tell you that?" "When did Claire tell you about our dad?"
Oh, the other night, we were both up late. I couldn't sleep, she was watching some documentary, and we got to talking. The other night, while I was asleep upstairs, my husband and my sister were talking about family trauma in my living room. It shouldn't have bothered me. Not really. This was good, wasn't it? Daniel and Claire getting along, becoming family in more than just name. I'd always wanted the people I loved to love each other, but there was a small, sharp feeling in my chest that I chose to ignore. Looking back, that was the first sign, not of the affair itself, that came later, but of my own willingness to dismiss my instincts in favor of the story I wanted to believe. The job search wasn't going well. Claire applied everywhere, or so she said. She updated her resume, networked on LinkedIn, went on interviews that never seemed to result in callbacks. Weeks turned into months, and the guest room started to feel permanent. She'd hung pictures on the walls, installed a small bookshelf, and replaced the generic throw pillows with ones she'd ordered online. "I'll pay you back," she kept saying, whenever I bought groceries or covered her phone bill or pretended not to notice that she'd ordered takeout on my credit card. "I know you will."
But a small, uncharitable part of me wondered if she'd ever get back on her feet. If maybe this, being taken care of, not having to work, not having to struggle, was exactly where Claire wanted to be. That uncharitable part felt like a betrayal, like I was being a bad sister for even thinking it. So I pushed it down and kept buying groceries and kept telling myself that family takes care of family. Daniel didn't seem to mind the expense. He made good money now, better than ever, and he'd taken over most of the household bills anyway. "You shouldn't have to support your sister on your salary," he said, and I appreciated the gesture, even as something about it felt off. But I was busy at work. Our biggest client was going through a messy acquisition, and I was on the team handling the financial due diligence. 12-hour days, sometimes longer. I came home exhausted, too tired to cook, too tired to talk, too tired to notice the small shifts happening in my own household. Claire started cooking dinner. That should have been a kindness, was a kindness on the surface. She'd have something ready when I walked in the door, a glass of wine already poured, candles lit on the dining table. "You work so hard," she'd say. "Let me do this." And Daniel would be there, loosening his tie, looking relaxed in a way I hadn't seen him look in years. "Your sister's a great cook," he said. "Way better than—" He caught himself, smiled. "Better than either of us." I laughed, because what else was I supposed to do? Accuse my sister of cooking dinner with malicious intent? But I noticed that she always served him first, that she remembered exactly how he liked his steak, medium rare, and how much salt he put in his food, too much, and that he hated Brussels sprouts no matter how they were prepared. I noticed that they had inside jokes now, references to the documentary they'd watched, the podcast she'd recommended, the true crime show they were apparently binging together. "When do you watch this stuff?" I asked, half joking. Claire looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at Claire. A moment passed. "Oh, she said, during the day mostly, and sometimes at night when we can't sleep." We can't sleep. Such a small thing, such a tiny pronoun, but it landed in my chest like a stone. I told myself I was being ridiculous. They were just keeping each other company while I was at work, while I was passed out from exhaustion. They were just becoming friends, and wasn't that what I wanted? Wasn't that better than the alternative? The two most important people in my life awkwardly tolerating each other forever? I told myself a lot of things that year. None of them were true. The first time I saw something that couldn't be explained away was a Sunday afternoon in late August. I'd been at the office since 7 in the morning. The acquisition was closing soon, and there were last-minute issues with the tax structure. By 3 o'clock, I was done. Not finished with the work, just done. Empty. I needed a nap and a hot shower and maybe to sit on my own couch without looking at a single spreadsheet. I texted Daniel that I was coming home early. No response, which wasn't unusual. He often left his phone in another room. The drive took 30 minutes. I pulled into the driveway, noticed Daniel's car, but not Claire's beat-up Corolla, and felt a small wave of relief. Maybe we could have the house to ourselves for once, watch something that wasn't a true crime documentary, actually talk. I let myself in through the garage, dropped my bag by the door, kicked off my heels. The house was quiet, which seemed strange. Daniel usually had music or the TV on. "Babe," I called out. No answer. I walked through the kitchen, through the living room, toward the back of the house where our bedroom was, and that's when I heard it, the shower running. There's no reason that should have been alarming. People take showers. Daniel took showers. The fact that he hadn't responded to me was probably just because he couldn't hear over the water. But my heart was beating faster than it should have been as I pushed open the bedroom door. And there was Claire,
Not in the shower with him, nothing so cliché, so dramatic. No, she was sitting on the edge of our bed, wearing nothing but one of Daniel's dress shirts, scrolling through her phone with her legs crossed like she belonged there. She looked up when I walked in. If she was surprised, she hid it well. "Oh, hey," she smiled, easy and warm. "You're home early. Daniel said you'd be working all day." The shower was still running. My husband was in my bathroom, behind a door that was very slightly ajar, and my sister was sitting on my bed in his shirt. "What are you doing in here?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears, thin, uncertain. "Oh God, this must look—" She laughed, glancing down at the shirt. "I spilled coffee all over myself, like a total klutz. I was doing laundry and literally everything I own is in the wash, so Daniel said I could borrow this while I wait for my stuff to dry. He was about to take a shower anyway." The bathroom door opened. Daniel emerged in a cloud of steam, a towel wrapped around his waist, looking exactly as surprised to see me as Claire had been. "Mel, I didn't hear you come in. I texted you." "Oh," he patted the towel absently, like looking for his phone. "I must have left it somewhere." I stood in the doorway of my own bedroom, looking at my husband in a towel and my sister in his shirt, and I felt something crack inside me. But I didn't say anything. That's the part I hate most looking back. Not that they had the audacity to look at me with such innocent expressions, not that the lie was so flimsy, so transparently ridiculous, but that I just stood there, and I believed them, or at least pretended to. "I'll let you get dressed," I said, and walked away. That night, Daniel was particularly attentive. He suggested we go to dinner, just the two of us. Claire could fend for herself for once. He took me to the restaurant where we'd had our first date, ordered the same wine, told me I was beautiful, held my hand across the table. "I feel like we've been ships passing in the night lately," he said, echoing my own thought from months earlier. "I miss you." "I've been right here." "I know, but work has been—" He sighed, looked down at his wine. "I feel like I don't get to really see you anymore, the real you. The real me." The phrase felt loaded somehow, though I couldn't say why. Who's the real me? He looked at me then, with those dark, perceptive eyes. The woman I married, the one who's so busy taking care of everyone else that she forgets to let anyone take care of her. I felt tears prick my eyes, and I wasn't sure if they were from emotion or exhaustion. "I love you," he said. "I hope you know that." "I know. And whatever you're thinking, whatever's going on in that head of yours, I need you to trust me, okay? Can you do that?" I should have asked what he meant, should have demanded to know why trusting him had become a question, but he was looking at me with such earnestness, such apparent sincerity, and I wanted so badly the suspicion to be wrong. "Okay," I said, and we went home and made love for the first time in weeks, and afterward he held me while I slept, and I convinced myself that everything was fine. The patterns became clearer after that, though I kept finding ways to unsee them. Claire started going to the gym at the same time Daniel went for his morning runs. "We keep each other accountable," she explained. "It's nice to have a workout buddy." Claire started wearing makeup around the house, even when she wasn't going anywhere. "I'm trying to get out of my depression spiral," she said. "Getting dressed like a real person helps." Daniel started coming home with small gifts for Claire. A book he thought she'd like, an article about a job opening, a coffee from her favorite cafe. "She's been working so hard on the job search," he said. "I just wanted to cheer her up." And I kept telling myself that this was normal, that sibling-in-laws could be close without it meaning anything, that my husband could care about my sister's well-being without it being a betrayal. I told myself a lot of things that year. None of them were true. The breaking point came 3 months later. I'd been at a conference all week, an accounting conference in Chicago, as boring as it sounds, but a necessary evil for the partnership track I was supposedly on. 3 days of seminars and networking and pretending to be interested in tax code updates. I was supposed to fly home Friday evening, but a winter storm grounded all the planes, and by the time I made it to the airport, I'd already missed the last flight that was actually leaving. I could have called Daniel, should have, but something stopped me, that same instinct I kept ignoring, louder now, more insistent. I rebooked for an early morning flight, found a hotel room near the airport, and told myself I'd surprise him by showing up Saturday morning instead. I texted him, "Flight delayed, storm, won't be back until tomorrow." His response came an hour later. "That sucks, miss you, be safe." Nothing suspicious about it. Normal husband response. I should have been comforted, but I wasn't. My flight landed at 6 in the morning. I didn't take a cab straight home. I stopped at a coffee shop first, bought Daniel his favorite latte, and myself something strong enough to counteract the jet lag. I thought about calling to let him know I was on my way, but the surprise seemed nicer, more romantic, the kind of gesture we used to make, before Claire, before the distance. The house was quiet when I pulled into the driveway. Both cars were there, Daniel's sedan and Claire's old Corolla, which I hadn't seen in a while. Getting it fixed, she'd said, vaguely, the last time I asked. I let myself in, dropped my suitcase by the door, walked toward the bedroom with the coffee in my hand, already practicing my smile. The bedroom door was closed. Strange, we always slept with it open. I pushed it open, and there they were. My husband, my sister, in my bed, asleep, tangled together in sheets I had bought, in a room I had decorated, in a life I thought was mine. Claire woke first. Her eyes fluttered open, registered me, and for one frozen second she looked scared. Actually scared, like a child caught doing something she knows is wrong. Then Daniel woke, and the fear on Claire's face was replaced with something else entirely, something that looked a lot like relief. "Mel," Daniel said, sitting up. He didn't scramble, didn't cover himself, just sat there, bare-chested, and looked at me like I was the intruder. "We need to talk." The coffee slipped from my hand. It hit the floor and exploded, dark liquid spreading across the hardwood in a stain that would never fully come out. And Claire laughed. I'll never forget that sound as long as I live. High and nervous and cruel all at once, like she couldn't contain whatever was bubbling up inside her, like she'd been waiting for this moment and couldn't believe it was finally here. "Well," she said, reaching for Daniel's shirt, the same shirt I'd found her in months ago. "I guess the cat's out of the bag." The next few weeks exist in my memory like photographs scattered across a floor, disconnected, out of order, each one a small piece of a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I remember packing a suitcase, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't work the zipper. Daniel standing in the doorway, arms crossed, watching me with an expression I'd never seen before. It wasn't guilt, it wasn't regret, it was impatience. "This is ridiculous. You don't have anywhere to go." "I'll stay at a hotel." "For how long? Forever?" He laughed, the same easy laugh I'd once found charming. "Mel, you're being dramatic. Let's just sit down and talk about this like adults." Adults. Like I was a child throwing a tantrum and he was the reasonable one. Like the problem was my reaction, not his betrayal. "There's nothing to talk about." "There's plenty to talk about." He stepped into the room, closing the distance between us. "Our marriage, our finances, the house, all the things we've built together." He paused, let the words land. "You don't just throw that away because you're upset." I finally got the suitcase closed. "I'm not upset. I'm done." His expression shifted, something darker, harder, the mask slipping. "You don't get to be done," he said quietly. "That's not how this works." I pushed past him, suitcase rolling behind me. He didn't try to stop me, just watched me go, arms still crossed, that same patient smirk on his face. Claire was in the living room. She'd gotten dressed, finally, jeans and a sweater, hair brushed, makeup subtle, like she was getting ready for a casual lunch, not the aftermath of her sister catching her in bed with her sister's husband. "Mel, wait," she stood, hands clasped in front of her. "I know this is hard to hear, but don't. But this has been coming for a long time. You and Daniel haven't been happy. Anyone could see it. You were always at work, always stressed, always... Don't you dare." My voice was ice. I didn't recognize it. "Don't you dare try to make this about my schedule. I'm just saying, you've been living in my house, eating food I bought, wearing clothes I paid for, and you were sleeping with my husband the entire time." She flinched, just slightly, but then her chin lifted. "Daniel loves me. He chose me, and I'm sorry if that's hard for you to hear, but it's the truth." I stared at her, this girl I raised, protected, sacrificed for. This woman who wore my husband's shirt and slept in my bed and had the audacity to stand here and talk about love like she knew what the word meant. "We're done," I said. "You and me, forever." I walked out the door. I didn't know then that she would take those words as a declaration of war. The hotel room was small and impersonal, which was exactly what I needed. Beige walls, stiff sheets, a TV bolted to the dresser. I sat on the edge of the bed and called in sick to work, the first time I'd done that in years, and then I did something I'd been putting off for too long. I logged into our bank accounts. The main checking account showed the normal ebb and flow of bills and deposits, nothing unusual. But when I tried to access the savings, I got an error message, "Account not found." My heart started beating faster. I tried again, checked my password, cleared my browser cache. "Account not found." The investment accounts were the same, the joint brokerage we built together, the one with nearly $200,000 in retirement funds. Gone, not showing up under my login. I called the bank, waited on hold for 20 minutes, finally got a human who told me, in a pleasant customer service voice, that those accounts had been closed 6 weeks ago. Closed? Yes, ma'am. The funds were transferred to a new account. What new account? I'm sorry, I don't have that information. You'd need to speak with the account holder. I am the account holder. A pause, the sound of typing. Ma'am, according to our records, those accounts were held solely in the name of Daniel Ashford. If you'd like to dispute that, you'll need to... I hung up. 6 weeks ago. He'd been planning this for 6 weeks, while I was at work, while I was at the conference, while I was lying next to him at night, believing we were partners. He was systematically erasing me from our finances. The room started spinning. I couldn't breathe. I called my own bank next, the account I'd had since I was 18, the one I'd never merged with Daniel's because it felt important to have something that was just mine. It was empty. Well, not quite empty. There was $17.43 left, presumably because that's the amount he couldn't transfer without triggering some kind of alert. There have been several transfers over the past month, the representative told me, all authorized via online banking. I didn't authorize any transfers. The login credentials match your account, ma'am. I didn't... My voice cracked. Someone stole from me. You'll need to file a police report, she said, and a fraud claim. But ma'am, if the login credentials are accurate... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I sat in that hotel room with my phone in my hand and realized the full scope of what Daniel had done. He'd been draining my accounts for weeks, moving money, closing joint accounts, rerouting everything to places I couldn't access. By the time I'd caught him in bed with Claire, he'd already ensured I had nothing left. And I knew, with a certainty that made me sick, that this wasn't just about the affair. This was revenge. Revenge for what? I didn't understand. But I would. Soon enough, I would. I couldn't afford the hotel for more than a few nights, not with $17.43 to my name. I swallowed my pride and called my mother, something I hadn't done in years. Our relationship had never recovered from my father's departure and her subsequent retreat into alcoholism, but she was still my mother, and I was desperate. She answered on the 7th ring. "Melanie, is that you?" I told her what happened. Not all of it, just enough. That Daniel had left me, that I had nowhere to go. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Claire already called me." My stomach dropped. "What?" "She told me everything, about how you walked in on them, how you said terrible things." A sigh, weary and resigned. "She said you told her you never wanted to see her again." "I caught them in bed together, Mom. And I'm sure that was very painful for you." Her voice was careful, measured, the voice of a woman who had long since stopped taking sides. "But Claire is very fragile, Melanie. She always has. And Daniel is my husband."
Has been good to her. Better than anyone else has been in years. She paused. They love each other. Sometimes these things just happen. These things just happen, like an affair, like a betrayal, like your own sister sleeping with your husband while you worked 12-hour days to keep a roof over everyone's head. I need a place to stay, Mom. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Because Claire is staying with me now. She and Daniel, they're not moving in together yet. She needs time to figure things out, and I offered her the guest room. I closed my eyes, let the words sink in. You're choosing her. I'm not choosing anyone. I'm just saying that right now, with everything so raw, having you both under one roof, you're choosing her, like you always have. That's not fair, Melanie. You're right. None of this is fair. I hung up before she could respond, and then I sat on that hotel bed and cried. Ugly, wrenching sobs that hurt my chest and left me gasping for air. I cried for my marriage, for my sister, for the mother who had never once chosen me. I cried until there was nothing left, and then I got up, washed my face, and started making a list. The list was short. What I have. My car, in my name, bought before the marriage. The clothes in my suitcase. My job. $17.43. What I need. A lawyer, a place to live, to survive. That last one seemed overwhelming, so I broke it down further. To survive. Find a cheap room to rent. Keep my job at all costs. Document everything. I didn't know yet how badly I would need that documentation. Didn't know that Daniel wasn't content to simply take my money. He wanted to take everything else, too. I found a room on Craigslist. It was the basement of an older woman's house, damp and dark and barely big enough for a twin bed and a microwave. $500 a month, cash. Mrs. Delgado didn't ask for references, didn't ask about my situation. She just looked at my face, tear-stained, exhausted, broken, and said, "I have a room. You can stay." She became my first angel. There would be others. The divorce papers arrived 2 weeks later. Daniel had wasted no time. The filing was comprehensive, meticulous, clearly prepared weeks in advance, long before I'd walked in on him and Claire.
I read through the pages in my basement room by the light of a single lamp and felt my stomach turn with each new revelation. He had cheated on me, stolen my money, destroyed my life, and now he was claiming to be the victim? I called a lawyer the next morning, the first one I could get an appointment with, a harried woman in a strip mall office whose desk was piled high with files. "He can't actually win this, can he?" I asked. She skimmed through the documents, her expression unreadable. Then she looked up at me with something like pity. "He's a partner at Ashford and Klein. You know that, right? His family's firm, yes. Which means he has access to the best divorce attorneys in the state, people who owe him favors, who golf with his father, who went to law school with his brother." She set the papers down. "He's not trying to win in court. He's trying to bury you in legal fees until you give up." "I can't afford legal fees. I can barely afford groceries." "I know," she sighed. "That's the point." The next few months were a masterclass in legal harassment. Subpoenas for documents I didn't have, depositions scheduled and rescheduled at the last minute, each one requiring me to take unpaid time off work, motions filed for petty reasons, each one requiring a response I couldn't afford. And through it all, Daniel and Claire presented a united front. I saw them sometimes in the halls of the courthouse, walking hand in hand, her head resting on his shoulder, looking like the picture of domestic bliss. She'd gained weight, I noticed. The gaunt hollowness of her face when she lived with me had filled out, replaced with a healthy glow. She was happy, genuinely, and she wanted me to know it. "I don't know how you can be here," she said once in the bathroom. I'd stepped in to wash my hands. She was reapplying lipstick at the mirror. I didn't respond, just dried my hands and turned to leave. "He never loved you, you know. He told me, right from the beginning. He said you were convenient, but that was all." I kept walking. "You were always so boring, so responsible and boring. Of course he wanted something more." The bathroom door closed behind me, and I stood in the courthouse hallway and reminded myself that assault would make things worse, that I had to be smarter than this, that showing any emotion would only give them ammunition. So I didn't cry. Not there, not in front of anyone. I saved the tears for the damp basement room where Mrs. Delgado couldn't hear me through the floor. My job became my lifeline. I threw myself into work with a desperation that surprised even me. The firm was going through a restructuring, and I volunteered for every unpleasant task: late-night audits, weekend number crunching, clients no one else wanted to deal with. I made myself indispensable. But even that wasn't safe. 3 months into the divorce proceedings, my boss called me into her office. Linda Thornton was a severe woman in her 60s, hair pulled back tight, reading glasses perpetually perched on the end of her nose. She'd been fair to me over the years, not warm, but fair. She didn't look fair now. "Sit down, Melanie." I sat. "We've received a complaint from a client." She slid a folder across the desk. I opened it, read through the accusation. My stomach dropped. According to the complaint, I had embezzled $25,000 from the Ashford account, one of the firm's oldest and most valuable clients. The complaint included forged documents, falsified receipts, an entire paper trail that looked damning. "I didn't do this." My voice was steady, but just barely. "The evidence is quite comprehensive." "The evidence is fabricated." I looked up at her. "Linda, someone is trying to destroy me, my ex-husband." "This isn't about your personal life." Her voice was ice. "This is about the reputation of this firm. The client is threatening to go to the press if we don't take immediate action." "What kind of action?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. I was fired that afternoon. No severance, no letter of recommendation, just a cardboard box of my belongings and a security escort to the door. I sat in my car in the parking lot, staring at the dashboard, and felt something in me finally break. Not my hope, that had been fading for months. Not my will to fight, that had been eroded by every new legal maneuver, every courtroom defeat, every cruel word from Claire's mouth. What broke was simpler than that. It was my belief that things would eventually make sense, that there was some underlying fairness to the world, some cosmic balance that would eventually right these wrongs. There wasn't. There never had been. Daniel had won. He and Claire had taken everything: my marriage, my money, my home, my job, my family, my reputation. They had destroyed me systematically and completely, and there was nothing I could do about it. I drove back to the basement room, climbed down the stairs, sat on the edge of the bed, and I thought for the first time in my life about not being alive anymore. I didn't try anything. I need you to know that. I sat with that darkness for hours, through the afternoon, into the evening, through the long, lonely night, but I didn't act on it. Something kept me tethered, some stubborn spark that refused to be extinguished. Mrs. Delgado saved me without knowing it. She knocked on my door at 7 the next morning with a plate of eggs and toast. "You didn't come up for dinner. I was worried." I took the plate, forced myself to eat, and something about that simple act of kindness, this stranger caring whether I ate, whether I lived, made me want to keep going. Not out of hope. I had no hope left. Out of spite. If Daniel and Claire wanted me to disappear, to give up, to fade into oblivion, then I would do the opposite. I would survive out of sheer stubborn refusal to let them win. It wasn't noble, it wasn't inspiring, but it was enough. The next 2 years were brutal. I took whatever jobs I could find, waitressing at a diner, retail at a big box store, night shifts at a distribution center, packing boxes until my back screamed and my hands bled. I worked doubles, triples, whatever it took to make rent and put food in my mouth. The divorce finalized without me. I couldn't afford to fight anymore, so I didn't show up to the final hearing. Daniel got everything he asked for: the house, the alimony, reduced to a token amount at least, and the satisfaction of knowing he'd crushed me. Claire sent me one text the day after the divorce was final. "Thanks for the life, MIA." I blocked her number.
I moved out of Mrs. Delgado's basement when she passed away. Her house sold to developers who didn't need tenants. Found a studio apartment on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place where you could hear your neighbors through the walls and the heat worked only sometimes. I lost weight, gained it back in unhealthy ways. Cheap fast food, energy drinks, whatever was quick and easy. My hair started graying at the temples. I looked 10 years older than my age, felt 20 years older. But I was alive. And slowly, imperceptibly, things started to shift. The shift started with a night class. I'd been working at the distribution center for 8 months when a coworker mentioned a community college nearby that offered free courses for low-income students. "They've got accounting stuff," she said, not knowing my history, if you're into that kind of thing. I wasn't sure I was into anything anymore, but I had nothing to lose. The class was financial planning for small businesses, an entry-level course I could have taught in my sleep back when I had a career. But I sat in the back row and took notes and reminded myself what it felt like to use my brain again. The professor was a retired CPA named Margaret Chen, silver-haired, sharp-tongued, intolerant of excuses. After the first class, she asked me to stay behind. "You're overqualified," she said. It wasn't a question. I used to work in accounting, had some career setbacks. She studied me for a long moment. What kind of setbacks? I don't know why I told her. Maybe because she reminded me of Linda Thornton, before Linda had believed the lies about me. Maybe because I was so tired of carrying the story alone. I told her everything: the marriage, the affair, the systematic destruction, the false embezzlement charges. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Do you still have documentation of what they did to you?" I did, all of it, saved on a flash drive I kept in my underwear drawer like it was worth $1 million. "Good," Margaret said, "because I know some people, and it's about time someone helped you fight back." Margaret's people turned out to be a network of professional women she'd built over 40 years in the industry. Lawyers, accountants, investors, executives, women who had climbed the ladder in fields that didn't want them and who made a point of helping other women do the same. They met monthly in the back room of a restaurant downtown. Margaret brought me to my first meeting 3 weeks after our conversation, warning me only that I should be ready to tell my story. I wasn't ready, not really, but I told it anyway. 23 women, ranging in age from 30 to 70, listened in silence as I described what Daniel and Claire had done. When I finished, no one offered sympathy. Instead, they offered something better: solutions. The lawyer in the group, Evelyn, mid-50s, former prosecutor, agreed to look at my case pro bono. The accountant, Anita, 60s, now on the board of a major nonprofit, offered to help trace the money. The investor, Dara, 40s, partner at a VC firm, suggested that if I ever wanted to start over, she might be able to help. "Why?" I asked after the meeting. "Why would you all help me? You don't know me." Margaret smiled. "Because every woman in that room has been where you are. Maybe not exactly, but close enough. And we all had someone who helped us when we needed it most." She paused. "That's how it works. Someone lifts you up, and then, someday, you lift someone else." The next 18 months were a different kind of battle. With Evelyn's help, I filed a lawsuit against Daniel for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and intentional infliction of emotional distress, the same thing he tried to claim against me. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. With Anita's help, we traced the money. Daniel had hidden it well, but not perfectly. Offshore accounts, real estate purchases in Claire's name, investments laundered to shell companies. It took months to unravel, but the picture that emerged was damning. He hadn't just stolen from me. He'd been planning to steal from me since before we were married. The documents revealed a pattern I'd never suspected. Daniel's previous 2 relationships had ended the same way. Women he'd charmed, married, drained, and discarded. Neither of them had fought back. Neither had the resources or the support. He'd learned that he could take everything and face no consequences. Until now. But the legal battle was only part of my transformation. In between court dates and depositions, I started over professionally. Dara introduced me to a small startup that needed someone to handle their finances. It was beneath my old position, part-time, low salary, uncertain future, but I took it anyway. The company was called Green Thread, and they made sustainable packaging materials. The founder was a woman named Priya, 10 years younger than me, who had maxed out her credit cards and burned through her savings to get the company off the ground. "I can't pay you what you're worth," she said at our first meeting. "I know. But if we make it, if this actually works, then we'll renegotiate." She grinned. "I like you." I liked her too. I liked the scrappy energy of the startup, the feeling that anything was possible, the way everyone was too busy working to play the office politics I'd grown to hate at my old firm. I threw myself into the work with the same intensity I'd once brought to my marriage, but this time the investment paid off. Green Thread started growing, first slowly, then faster. Within a year, we'd landed a major retail contract. Within 2 years, we were being written about in industry publications. Within 3, the company was valued at $30 million, and I owned 12% of it. Not because I demanded equity, I hadn't had the leverage for that, but because Priya believed in sharing success with the people who helped build it. The shares I'd been granted in lieu of higher salary became worth more than anything Daniel had ever taken from me. I was becoming wealthy, genuinely wealthy, in a way I'd never imagined, and no one knew it. Not my mother, whom I hadn't spoken to in years, not my former colleagues who thought I'd disappeared, certainly not Daniel or Claire. I liked it that way. The secrecy felt like armor. No one could take from me what they didn't know I had. The lawsuit settled on a Tuesday afternoon in spring. Daniel's lawyers had fought hard, but the evidence was overwhelming. The judge ruled in my favor on every count, awarding me not just the money he'd stolen, but punitive damages for the fraud. I didn't attend the final hearing. Evelyn went on my behalf, called me with the verdict from the courthouse steps. "It's over. You won." I was in my office at Green Thread when the call came. The late afternoon sun was slanting through the windows, painting everything gold. I'd been reviewing projections for our expansion into European markets, mundane work, the kind of thing that once would have bored me, but now felt like a privilege. "You won." The words didn't land right away. They floated somewhere above my head, abstract and unreal. "Mel, did you hear me?" "I heard you." My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant. "How much?" Evelyn told me the number. It was more than I had expected. The punitive damages had been substantial. The judge clearly unimpressed by Daniel's behavior throughout the proceedings. Combined with the money we'd traced and recovered, it represented everything he'd taken from me and then some. But here's the thing about winning. It doesn't feel the way you think it will. I'd imagined this moment during my darkest nights in that basement room, during the endless shifts at the distribution center, during the years of rebuilding when every step forward felt like climbing through mud. I'd imagined triumph, vindication, the sweet taste of justice finally served. Instead, I felt hollow, tired, like I'd been clenching every muscle in my body for 5 years and could finally let go. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we collect. His assets are being seized as we speak. The house, the accounts, everything." Evelyn paused. "There's something else you should know." "What?" "He and Claire, they're not doing well, financially or otherwise. Word is he's been hemorrhaging money for years. Bad investments, gambling, the lifestyle he couldn't actually afford. The settlement is going to wipe him out." I waited to feel satisfaction. It didn't come. "Thank you, Evelyn, for everything. You did this, Mel. Don't forget that. You fought when anyone else would have given up." After I hung up, I sat in my office chair and stared at the wall. The gold light had faded to something softer, the first hints of evening creeping in. Somewhere in the building, I could hear Priya laughing at something, that bright, unself-conscious laugh that always made me smile. I was supposed to feel different, transformed, like the ending of a movie where the music swells and the protagonist walks into a sunset of unlimited possibility. But I just felt like me, older, wiser, scarred in ways that would never fully heal, but still, somehow, standing. I went home that night to the house I'd bought 6 months earlier, a real house, not a basement room, with a garden and a kitchen that got morning light and enough space for all the books I'd been slowly accumulating. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on my back porch, watched the stars come out one by one, and I let myself, for the first time in years, think about what came next. The months after the settlement were strange. I'd spent so long surviving, just getting through each day, just putting one foot in front of the other, that I didn't know how to do anything else. Suddenly, I had money, security, a career that was flourishing beyond my wildest dreams, and I had no idea what to do with any of it. Green Thread went public that fall. My 12% became worth more than I could have earned in 20 lifetimes at my old accounting firm. I sat in my office on IPO day, watching the numbers climb on my computer screen, feeling like I was watching someone else's life. Priya found me there an hour after the market closed. Why aren't you celebrating? She dropped into the chair across from my desk, champagne flute in hand. Her eyes were bright with excitement, with the giddy disbelief of sudden success. We did it, Mel. We actually did it. I know. Then why do you look like someone died? I considered the question, tried to find words for the strange emptiness that had settled into my chest. I don't know how to be happy, I said finally. I think I forgot. Priya's smile faded. She set down her champagne and leaned forward, elbows on her knees. What happened to you? She asked softly. Before Green Thread. You never talk about it. I'd been careful about that, keeping my past separate from my present, building walls between the woman I'd been and the woman I was becoming. But something about the day, the magnitude of what we'd accomplished, made the walls feel unnecessary. So I told her. Not everything. I still couldn't talk about Claire without my voice breaking, but enough. The marriage that had seemed perfect, the betrayal, the years of devastation, the slow, painful climb back to something resembling a life. When I finished, Priya was quiet for a long moment. That explains a lot, she said. Like what? Like why you work like you're trying to outrun something. Like why you never let anyone get close. Like why you always seem surprised when good things happen, like you're waiting for the catch. I looked down at my hands. There's always been a catch. Not this time. She reached across the desk and squeezed my fingers. This time you won. This is real. You're allowed to enjoy it. I don't know how. Then learn. She smiled, gentle and fierce at once. You learned how to survive. You learned how to fight back. You learned how to build something from nothing. Learning to be happy is just one more skill. And you've got time now. All the time in the world. I tried to take her advice. I renovated the house, knocked out walls, added a sunroom, planted the kind of garden I'd always imagined but never had time for. I traveled to places I'd only seen in magazines, the lavender fields of Provence, the temples of Kyoto, the wild coasts of Ireland. I bought clothes that fit properly, ate at restaurants without checking the prices, said yes to experiences I would have once dismissed as frivolous. But underneath it all, something was still broken. I couldn't trust anyone. That was the core of it. Every new relationship, friendship, professional connection, potential romance felt like a minefield. I kept waiting for the betrayal, the angle, the hidden motive. People would reach out and I would pull back, certain that their kindness was just the prelude to cruelty. Margaret noticed. She'd stayed in my life, checking in monthly, inviting me to the meetings even though I was now technically one of the success stories. You're isolating, she said one evening, over dinner at her favorite restaurant. I can see it happening. I'm fine. You're alone. There's a difference. I like being alone. No, you don't. She set down her fork and fixed me with that sharp, unwavering gaze. What do you want me to do? Open myself up again? Let someone in? Give them ammunition to destroy me? Everyone isn't Daniel. Everyone could be Daniel. That's the problem. I pushed my food around my plate. I didn't see it coming. I was married to him for years and I didn't see it. What makes you think I'd see it the next time? Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that stayed with me for months. You're right that you didn't see it. But you know why? Not because you're naive or stupid, because you were good. Because you trusted in good faith. Because you gave him the benefit of the doubt. Because you loved him the way people deserve to be loved. Lean forward. He didn't fool you because you're broken, Melanie. He fooled you because you're decent. And that's not a flaw to be fixed. It's a gift to be protected. How am I supposed to protect it? By choosing better, by learning the signs, by trusting yourself again. Not your judgment of others, but your judgment of you. You knew something was wrong. You told me. You knew for months before you caught them. You just didn't let yourself believe it. She was right about that too. The instincts I ignored, the red flags I explained away, they hadn't been wrong. I just had refused to listen. What if I never trust anyone again? Then they've won. Margaret's voice was matter-of-fact, almost harsh. Not just the money, not just the years. They've won everything. They've taken your capacity for love. Is that what you want? To let them have that too? No, God no. I'd fought too hard to let them take anything else from me. But fighting was one thing. Healing was something else entirely. I didn't hear from Claire for almost 3 years after the settlement. I knew, through the grapevine of Margaret's network, that she and Daniel had gotten married. A small ceremony, nothing like the wedding he'd given me. I knew they'd moved into the smaller house after his assets were seized, that he'd been let go from the family firm, his father finally losing patience with the scandal, that he was scrambling to reinvent himself as a consultant, or advisor, or whatever ex-lawyers call themselves when they've been disgraced. I didn't care. At least, I told myself I didn't care. But every time I heard an update, something twisted in my chest. Not jealousy, I was long past wanting Daniel back. Not anger, the settlement had exhausted that particular fuel. It was something stranger. Grief, maybe. For the sister I'd loved before she became this person. For the relationship we might have had, if she'd made different choices. I thought about her more than I wanted to admit. Wondered if she was happy.
genuinely happy with the man she'd stolen from me, wondered if she ever thought about what she'd done, wondered if she felt any remorse at all. The answers, when they came, were not what I expected. I was in my home office when the notification popped up on my screen. Green Thread had been in the news lately, a feature in Forbes, a profile in the Wall Street Journal, the kind of attention that comes with being a unicorn company. My name was mentioned in most of the articles, not prominently. I wasn't the founder, just the CFO who'd helped build something extraordinary, but enough that anyone looking for me could find me. The message was from a real estate site, alerting me that someone had searched for property records in my county using my name. I stared at the notification for a long time. It could have been anyone, a reporter doing background research, a business contact looking for my address, a random stranger who shared my name. But my gut told me otherwise. I strengthened the security around the house, installed better cameras, started varying my route to work. I didn't tell anyone about the notification. Not Priya, not Margaret, not my therapist. Yes, I finally had a therapist after years of resistance. It felt paranoid to worry about a single property search. Obsessive, unhealthy. But I'd learned to listen to my instincts, and my instincts were screaming. The second message came a week later, an email this time, from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was empty. The body contained only 3 words. I know everything. My hands shook as I forwarded it to my security consultant. He traced it to a public library computer 3 states away. No useful information. A week after that, a letter arrived at my office. Handwritten, no return address. You think you've won. You haven't. People like you never really win. You just delay losing. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but something about it nagged at me. Something about the loops on the letters, the ways certain words were formed. I showed it to Margaret. It's her, she said immediately. Claire, how can you be sure? I had her background investigated, remember? Part of the fraud case. I've seen samples of her handwriting. She held the letter up to the light, as if it might reveal more secrets. She's disguising it, but the fundamentals are there. The way she forms her Ys, the pressure on the downstrokes. Why would she do this? Because she's watching you succeed. Because whatever fantasy she constructed about her life with Daniel is falling apart, and she can't stand the idea that you're thriving while she suffers. She's the one who... I stopped, took a breath. She destroyed my life. She doesn't get to be the victim now. Of course she doesn't, but in her mind, she probably is. That's how people like Claire work. They rewrite history until they're the hero of their own story, until everything that went wrong is someone else's fault. I thought about that for a long time, about Claire's capacity for self-deception, about the stories she might be telling herself, that I had driven her to Daniel, that I had abandoned her, that somehow I was the villain in a narrative that should have painted her as the monster she was. What do I do? Document everything, report it to the police even though they probably won't do anything, and prepare yourself. For what? For her to escalate. People like this don't stop. They don't get tired. The only way this ends is if she runs out of options or if she decides to confront you directly. I didn't like either of those possibilities, but I filed the report, added to my security measures, and waited.
The waiting was its own kind of torture. Every unknown number on my phone made my heart race. Every stranger who looked at me too long on the street became a potential threat. I started having trouble sleeping again, the old patterns returning, the vigilance that had kept me alive during the worst years, but now felt like a prison. You're letting her win, my therapist said, by living in fear. I'm being cautious. There's a difference between caution and captivity. She leaned forward in her chair. Tell me, when was the last time you did something purely for joy? Not for safety, not for security, just because it made you happy? I couldn't answer. I genuinely couldn't remember. That's what I mean. She's not even here and she's controlling your life, just like before. Before, I didn't know she was dangerous. And now you do. But knowing something is dangerous doesn't mean you have to stop living. It means you adapt, you take precautions, and then you keep living anyway. Easy to say, harder to do. But I tried. I made myself accept invitations I would have declined, made myself travel even when part of me wanted to stay locked in my house, made myself trust people in small ways, even when every instinct screamed that trust was just another word for vulnerability. And slowly, imperceptibly, I started to feel like myself again. Not the self I'd been before Daniel, that person was gone forever, but a new self, stronger, more scarred, but also more resilient. I thought maybe I'd escaped Claire's shadow, that the letters were just empty threats, sound and fury signifying nothing. I was wrong. She came on a Thursday night in October. I was home alone, my assistant had left hours ago, and the house was quiet. I'd poured myself a glass of wine, lit a fire in the fireplace, settled in with a book I'd been meaning to read for months. It was the kind of evening I'd learned to treasure, peaceful, solitary, entirely my own. And then the knock came. 3 fast taps, followed by one slow one. My blood went cold. I didn't move, sat frozen in my chair, wine glass in hand, waiting for the sound to come again. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe it was just the house settling, the wind rattling something loose. 3 fast taps, one slow. No imagination. That was Claire's knock, the knock she'd used since childhood. I could have ignored it, could have stayed in my chair, let her stand out there in the October cold until she gave up, could have called the police, reported her for harassment, let them deal with it. But something made me move. Something made me set down the wine glass, walk to the front door, and look through the security monitor I'd had installed. And there she was. Smaller than I remembered. Thinner. Wrapped in a coat that looked too big for her, hunched against the wind. Her hair was longer, streaked with gray that hadn't been there the last time I'd seen her. And there was a bruise on her face, dark and angry, spreading across her left cheekbone. She looked up directly into the camera, as if she knew I was watching. And even through the screen, even after everything, I saw something in her eyes that I recognized. Terror. Real, genuine terror. She raised her hand and knocked again, the same pattern. And then she called out, her voice muffled through the door. Melanie, please, I know you're in there. I know you probably hate me, and I deserve it. But please, I need your help. He's going to kill me. I stood in my hallway, looking at the sister who had destroyed my life, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even the vindication I'd imagined during my darkest moments when I'd fantasized about Claire suffering the way I had. Just a vast empty space where my feelings about her used to live. And then, beneath the nothing, something else stirred. A question. Do I let her in? I opened the door. I'm not sure I made a conscious decision to do it. My hand was on the deadbolt before my brain caught up, turning the lock, pulling the door wide. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and dead leaves, and something else, something that smelled like fear. Claire stood on my doorstep, shivering. She looked worse up close. The bruise I'd seen through the camera was just the beginning. Her lip was split, poorly concealed with makeup. There were shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, and she held herself with the careful stillness of someone who had learned that sudden movements led to pain. Mel, her voice cracked on my name. Thank you. Thank you. Come in. I stepped aside and she moved past me into the warmth of my house. I watched her take in the entryway, the high ceilings, the art on the walls, the obvious wealth that surrounded me. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, settled into something more complicated. You've done well, she said. Yes. I heard about the company, Green Thread. I saw the articles. Is that why you're here? She flinched. No, I mean, I knew you'd done well, but that's not why I... She stopped, took a breath. Can we sit down, please? I've been driving for 6 hours and How did you find me? What? My address. I'm not listed. The house isn't in my name. Claire looked down at her hands. They were shaking, I noticed. From cold or from fear, I couldn't tell. I hired someone, a private investigator. I know that sounds... It sounds like stalking. I know how it sounds. But I was desperate, Mel. I didn't know where else to go. She looked up at me, and there were tears in her eyes now. He's going to kill me. I'm not being dramatic. He told me. He said if I left, he'd find me and he'd... She couldn't finish the sentence. I stood in my beautiful entryway, looking at my sister, and I felt the nothing start to crack. Beneath it was something harder to name. Not sympathy, not quite, but not indifference either. The living room is through there. I'll make tea. I followed my gesture, disappearing through the archway. I went to the kitchen, put the kettle on, and stood there gripping the edge of the counter while my heart pounded in my chest. Claire was in my house. Claire, who had slept with my husband. Claire, who had laughed as they destroyed me. Claire, who had sent threatening letters and watched me from the shadows. And now she was sitting in my living room, bruised and terrified, claiming that Daniel, my Daniel, the charming lawyer who had once brought me flowers for no reason, was going to kill me. Part of me wanted to call the police. Part of me wanted to throw her out into the rain. Part of me wanted to scream every horrible thing I'd been holding inside for 7 years. But a smaller part, a quieter part, wanted to know what had happened, how the life she'd stolen from me had turned into something that left her on my doorstep, shaking for fear. The kettle whistled. I made 2 cups of tea and carried them to the living room. Claire was perched on the edge of my sofa like a bird ready to take flight. She'd taken off her too large coat, revealing a sweater that hung loosely on her frame. She was so thin, too thin, the way people get when they stop eating from stress or fear or both. I handed her a cup, sat in the armchair across from her, said nothing. She wrapped her hands around the mug, as if trying to absorb its warmth. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "You must hate me." I considered the question, probed the place inside me that used to live. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I thought I would. I thought if I ever saw you again, I'd feel something. But right now, I just feel tired." She nodded, like this made sense. "I'd hate me if our positions were reversed. You'd have to be capable of empathy for that." She flinched, looked down at her tea. "I deserve that," she said quietly. "I deserve worse than that. I know I do." "Do you know, I mean?" I leaned forward. "Because I've wondered for years whether you understood what you did, whether you ever lay awake at night thinking about it, or whether you just, I don't know, whether you just moved on, like it didn't matter." "It mattered." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "It mattered more than anything." "Then why did you do it?" She looked up at me, and for the first time I saw something in her eyes that wasn't fear, something older, deeper. "Because I was jealous," she said. "Because I'd been jealous my whole life. And when he started paying attention to me, when he told me things about you, about your marriage, when he said you didn't appreciate what you had," she trailed off. "It was an excuse. I knew it was an excuse, but I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe I deserved something that was yours." "What things did he tell you?" "He said that you were cold, that you never made time for him, that he'd married you for the wrong reasons and he regretted it." She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "I believed him. I was so stupid. I believed everything he said because it made me feel like what I was doing was justified." I sat with that for a moment. The manipulation, the lies he'd told her, while he was also lying to me. He was playing us against each other from the beginning. The waiting was its own kind of torture. Every unknown number on my phone made my heart race. Every stranger who looked at me too long on the street became a potential threat. I started having trouble sleeping again, the old patterns returning, the vigilance that had kept me alive during the worst years, but now felt like a prison. "You're letting her win," my therapist said, "by living in fear." "I'm being cautious." "There's a difference between caution and captivity." She leaned forward in her chair. "Tell me, when was the last time you did something purely for joy? Not for safety, not for security, just because it made you happy?" I couldn't answer. I genuinely couldn't remember. "That's what I mean. She's not even here and she's controlling your life, just like before. Before, I didn't know she was dangerous. And now you do. But knowing something is dangerous doesn't mean you have to stop living. It means you adapt, you take precautions, and then you keep living anyway." Easy to say, harder to do. But I tried. I made myself accept invitations I would have declined, made myself travel even when part of me wanted to stay locked in my house, made myself trust people in small ways, even when every instinct screamed that trust was just another word for vulnerability. And slowly, imperceptibly, I started to feel like myself again. Not the self I'd been before Daniel, that person was gone forever, but a new self, stronger, more scarred, but also more resilient. I thought maybe I'd escaped Claire's shadow, that the letters were just empty threats, sound and fury signifying nothing. I was wrong. She came on a Thursday night in October. I was home alone, my assistant had left hours ago, and the house was quiet. I'd poured myself a glass of wine, lit a fire in the fireplace, settled in with a book I'd been meaning to read for months. It was the kind of evening I'd learned to treasure, peaceful, solitary, entirely my own. And then the knock came. 3 fast taps, followed by 1 slow one. My blood went cold. I didn't move, sat frozen in my chair, wineglass in hand, waiting for the sound to come again. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe it was just the house settling, the wind rattling something loose. 3 fast taps, 1 slow. No imagination. That was Claire's knock, the knock she'd used since childhood. I could have ignored it, could have stayed in my chair, let her stand out there in the October cold until she gave up, could have called the police, reported her for harassment, let them deal with it. But something made me move. Something made me set down the wineglass, walk to the front door, and look through the security monitor I'd had installed. And there she was. Smaller than I remembered. Thinner. Wrapped in a coat that looked too big for her, hunched against the wind. Her hair was longer, streaked with gray that hadn't been there the last time I'd seen her. And there was a bruise on her face, dark and angry, spreading across her left cheekbone. She looked up, directly into the camera, as if she knew I was watching. And even through the screen, even after everything, I saw something in her eyes that I recognized. Terror. Real, genuine terror. She raised her hand and knocked again, the same pattern. And then she called out, her voice muffled through the door. "Melanie, please, I know you're in there. I know you probably hate me, and I deserve it. But please, I need your help. He's going to kill me." I stood in my hallway, looking at the sister who had destroyed my life, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even the vindication I'd imagined during my darkest moments when I'd fantasized about Claire suffering the way I had. Just a vast empty space where my feelings about her used to live. And then, beneath the nothing, something else stirred. A question. Do I let her in? I opened the door. I'm not sure I made a conscious decision to do it. My hand was on the deadbolt before my brain caught up, turning the lock, pulling the door wide. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and dead leaves, and something else, something that smelled like fear. Claire stood on my doorstep, shivering. She looked worse up close. The bruise I'd seen through the camera was just the beginning. Her lip was split, poorly concealed with makeup. There were shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, and she held herself with the careful stillness of someone who had learned that sudden movements led to pain. Mel, her voice cracked on my name. Thank you. Thank you. Come in. I stepped aside and she moved past me into the warmth of my house. I watched her take in the entryway, the high ceilings, the art on the walls, the obvious wealth that surrounded me. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, settled into something more complicated. You've done well, she said. Yes. I heard about the company, Green Thread. I saw the articles. Is that why you're here? She flinched. No, I knew you'd done well, but that's not why I... She stopped, took a breath. Can we sit down, please? I've been driving for 6 hours and How did you find me? What? My address. I'm not listed. The house isn't in my name. Claire looked down at her hands. They were shaking, I noticed. From cold or from fear, I couldn't tell. I hired someone, a private investigator. I know that sounds... It sounds like stalking. I know how it sounds. But I was desperate, Mel. I didn't know where else to go. She looked up at me, and there were tears in her eyes now. He's going to kill me. I'm not being dramatic. He told me. He said if I left, he'd find me and he'd... She couldn't finish the sentence. I stood in my beautiful entryway, looking at my sister, and I felt the nothing start to crack. Beneath it was something harder to name. Not sympathy, not quite, but not indifference either. The living room is through there. I'll make tea. I followed my gesture, disappearing through the archway. I went to the kitchen, put the kettle on, and stood there gripping the edge of the counter while my heart pounded in my chest. Claire was in my house. Claire, who had slept with my husband. Claire, who had laughed as they destroyed me. Claire, who had sent threatening letters and watched me from the shadows. And now she was sitting in my living room, bruised and terrified, claiming that Daniel, my Daniel, the charming lawyer who had once brought me flowers for no reason, was going to kill me. Part of me wanted to call the police. Part of me wanted to throw her out into the rain. Part of me wanted to scream every horrible thing I'd been holding inside for 7 years. But a smaller part, a quieter part, wanted to know what had happened, how the life she'd stolen from me had turned into something that left her on my doorstep, shaking for fear. The kettle whistled. I made 2 cups of tea and carried them to the living room. Claire was perched on the edge of my sofa like a bird ready to take flight. She'd taken off her too large coat, revealing a sweater that hung loosely on her frame. She was so thin, too thin, the way people get when they stop eating from stress or fear or both. I handed her a cup, sat in the armchair across from her, said nothing. She wrapped her hands around the mug, as if trying to absorb its warmth. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "You must hate me." I considered the question, probed the place inside me that used to live. I don't know, I said honestly. I thought I would. I thought if I ever saw you again, I'd feel something. But right now, I just feel tired. She nodded, like this made sense. I'd hate me if our positions were reversed. You'd have to be capable of empathy for that. She flinched, looked down at her tea. I deserve that, she said quietly. I deserve worse than that. I know I do. Do you know, I leaned forward. Because I've wondered for years whether you understood what you did, whether you ever lay awake at night thinking about it, or whether you just, whether you just moved on, like it didn't matter. It mattered. Her voice was barely above a whisper. It mattered more than anything. Then why did you do it? She looked up at me, and for the first time I saw something in her eyes that wasn't fear, something older, deeper. Because I was jealous, she said. Because I'd been jealous my whole life. And when he started paying attention to me, when he told me things about you, about your marriage, when he said you didn't appreciate what you had, she trailed off. It was an excuse. I knew it was an excuse, but I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe I deserved something that was yours. What things did he tell you? He said that you were cold, that you never made time for him, that he'd married you for the wrong reasons and he regretted it. She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. I believed him. I was so stupid. I believed everything he said because it made me feel like what I was doing was justified. I sat with that for a moment. The manipulation, the lies he'd told her, while he was also lying to me. He was playing us against each other from the beginning. Margaret met us in the lobby. If she was surprised by Claire's appearance, she didn't show it. She led us to a conference room on the third floor. Comfortable chairs, good light, the kind of space designed to put people at ease during difficult conversations. Sit down, she said to Claire. Not unkindly, but not warm either. Tell me everything. Claire glanced at me. I nodded. And then she began to talk. The story that emerged was more detailed than what she told me the night before. She described Daniel's escalating obsession with me over the years, how he collected articles about Green Thread, about my success, about the life I'd built after he tried to destroy me, how he kept a folder, a physical folder, thick with papers, that he called his research. Research into what? Margaret asked. Into her. Claire nodded toward me. Her assets, her routines, the people around her, everything. How long has this been going on? Since the settlement. Maybe before. Claire hesitated. He never really got over losing. He'd built his whole identity around winning, around being smarter than everyone else. And when Melanie beat him, she didn't just beat him, Margaret said. She exposed him. His fraud, his manipulation, the fact that he'd done this to other women before. She destroyed his reputation along with his finances. Yes, Claire's voice was quiet. He couldn't accept that. He became obsessed with her, talked about her constantly. At first, I thought it was just venting, but then I started finding the files, the photos, the notes. What kind of notes? Claire closed her eyes, as if trying to remember. Schedules. Her schedule. When she left for work, when she came home, what car she drove, where she went on weekends. It was like a stalking diary. I felt sick. All those years of security precautions, and he'd been watching me anyway. What about recently? Margaret pressed. You said he's gotten worse. What does that mean specifically? The last few months, it's been different. Claire opened her eyes. More intense. He stopped pretending it was just venting, started talking about making things right, about balancing the scales. What does that mean? I don't know exactly. He was careful about what he said around me, but I overheard him on the phone once talking to someone. He said something about the house and the right moment. She looked at me. Your house, I think. He was talking about doing something to your house. Margaret and I exchanged a glance. Arson? Margaret asked. Maybe, or maybe something else. He has connections from his old law firm days, people who owe him favors, people who aren't afraid to do things that are, she stopped, illegal, people who aren't afraid to do illegal things. The room was silent for a long moment. Is there anything else? Margaret asked. Anything that might help us understand exactly what he's planning? Claire shook her head. That's everything I know. I swear. I would have brought the files if I could, but he keeps them locked up. I only saw them when he was careless. Margaret leaned back in her chair, processing. Here's what we're going to do. First, we strengthen security around Melanie. Cameras, alarms, private security if necessary. Second, we find out more about these connections Daniel has. If he's working with people, there's a paper trail somewhere. Third, she looked at Claire, we figure out whether you're willing to help us bring him down. Claire blinked. What do you mean? I mean, testify, file charges, go to the police with everything you know about his plans. It won't be easy. He'll fight back, probably viciously, but it's the only way to stop him permanently. He'll kill me. Claire's voice was barely above a whisper. If I testify against him, he'll kill me. Not if we protect you. You can't protect me from him. You don't understand what he's capable of. I think I understand exactly what he's capable of. I've seen what he did to your sister, and I've spent 40 years helping women fight men exactly like him. She leaned forward. You made choices that hurt Melanie, hurt her badly. I'm not going to pretend that doesn't matter, but you have a chance now to do something right, to help stop him before he hurts anyone else. Are you going to take that chance, or are you going to run? Claire looked at me. I saw the fear in her eyes, the bone-deep terror that Daniel had instilled in her over years of abuse. But I also saw something else, something that might have been courage. I'll do it, she said. Whatever you need me to do, I'll do it. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Margaret mobilized her network. Evelyn, the lawyer who had helped me win the settlement, came out of retirement to build the criminal case against Daniel. Anita, the accountant, traced the money he'd been using to fund his surveillance, what little remained after the settlement had stripped away most of his assets. And Claire talked. She gave depositions, provided documentation, submitted to interviews with police and prosecutors. She described the violence in her marriage with a clinical detachment that my heart ached despite everything.
I watched her transform over those weeks. The hunched posture straightened, the fear in her eyes gave way to something harder. She was still fragile. Years of abuse don't heal in weeks, but she was also finding something that looked like strength. We didn't talk much beyond what was necessary for the case. I wasn't ready for that, wasn't ready to have real conversations about what she'd done, what it cost me, whether forgiveness was even possible. But sometimes, in the moments between depositions, I caught her looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Regret, maybe, or gratitude, or something more complicated than either. The police moved on Daniel 3 weeks after Claire's arrival at my door. He was arrested at his apartment, the small, cramped place he'd moved to after losing everything, on charges of stalking, harassment, and conspiracy to commit arson. The evidence was overwhelming. The files Claire described, detailed plans for attacking my home, records of payments to people who were willing to carry out his schemes. He was denied bail. The judge cited flight risk and danger to the community. I didn't attend the arrest, didn't want to see him in handcuffs, didn't want to give him the satisfaction of my presence, but I watched the news coverage that night, saw them lead him out of the building in restraints, and felt something I hadn't expected. Sadness. Not for him, he deserved everything that was coming, but for the waste of it all, the years he'd spent on revenge instead of building something new, the energy he poured into destruction instead of growth, the choices that led him here, to this moment, alone and despised. He could have started over, could have taken the loss and moved on, could have become someone better. But he chose not to, and now he was facing decades in prison. I turned off the TV, poured myself a glass of wine, sat in my living room, the living room he'd planned to burn down, and let the silence settle around me. It was over, finally, truly over, but something still felt unfinished. "We need to talk." Claire was standing in my doorway, 2 months after her arrival. She'd been staying in a small apartment I'd rented for her, close enough that the security team could keep an eye on her, but far enough that we had space. "About what?" "About everything." She stepped into my living room, moving slowly, as if she expected to be thrown out any moment. "About what?" "About everything." She stepped into my living room, moving slowly, as if she expected to be thrown out any moment. "About what?" "About everything." She stepped into my living room, moving slowly, as if she expected to be thrown out any moment. "About what?" "About everything." She stepped into my living room, moving slowly, as if she expected to be thrown out any moment. "About what?" "About everything." She stepped into my living room, moving slowly, as if she expected to be thrown out any moment. "About what?" "About everything." She stepped into my living room, moving slowly, as if she expected to be thrown out any moment. "About what?" "About everything." She stepped into my living room, moving slowly, as if she expected to be thrown out any moment. "About what?" "About everything." She stepped into my living room, moving slowly, as if she expected to be thrown out any moment. "About what?" "About everything." She stepped into my living room, moving slowly, as if she expected to be thrown out any moment. "About what?" "About everything." She stepped into my living room, moving slowly, as if she expected to be thrown out any moment. "About what?" "About everything." She stepped into my living room, moving slowly, as if she expected to be thrown out any moment. "About what?" "About everything." She stepped into my living room, moving slowly, as if she expected to be thrown out any moment. "About what?" "About everything." She stepped into my living room, moving slowly, as if she expected to be thrown out any moment. "About what?" "About everything." She stepped into my living room, moving slowly, as if she expected to be thrown out any moment. "About what?" "About everything." She stepped into my living room, moving slowly, as if she expected to be thrown out any moment. "About what?" "About everything." She stepped into my living room, moving slowly, as if she expected to be thrown out any moment. "About what?" "About everything." She stepped into my living room, moving slowly, as if she expected to be thrown out any moment. "About what?" "About everything." She stepped into my living room, moving slowly, as if she expected to be thrown out any moment. "About what?" "About everything." She stepped into my living room, moving slowly, as if she expected to be thrown out any moment. "About what?" "About everything." She stepped into my living room, moving slowly, as if she expected to be thrown out any moment. "About what?" "About everything." She stepped into my living room, moving slowly, as if she expected.
Did it work? I asked quietly. Did taking my life make you feel less small? Claire's eyes filled with tears. No, it made me feel worse, because I had to wake up every day and know what I'd done, and because the life I'd taken, it wasn't even real. Daniel never loved me. He just used me to hurt you, and then when you were gone, he started hurting me instead. I'm sorry that happened to you. She looked up, surprised. You are? Yes, I meant it, I realized. Despite everything, I meant it. No one deserves what he did to you, what he did to either of us. Claire wiped her eyes. I don't deserve your sympathy. Maybe not, but you have it anyway. I stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the garden I'd planted, the life I'd built. I've spent a lot of years being angry at you, at him, at everyone who failed me, and I'm tired, Claire. I'm tired of carrying that anger around. Are you saying you forgive me? I turned to face her. I'm saying I want to stop being hurt by this. I'm saying I want to move on. Whether that includes forgiving you, I don't know yet, but I'm willing to find out. She nodded, slowly. That's more than I deserve. Probably, but I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me. I sat back down. You were my sister before you were my enemy, and I miss having a sister. I don't know if we can get that back, but maybe we can build something new. Something new, she repeated. I'd like that, if you'll let me try. I'll let you try. I met her eyes. But Claire, if you ever betray me again, if you ever lie to me, or manipulate me, or choose someone else over our relationship, we're done. Forever. Do you understand? I understand. Good. I stood up again. Now get out. I have work to do. She smiled, a real smile, the first genuine one I'd seen from her in years. Same old Melanie. Get out. She left, still smiling, and I sat in my living room and wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake, or if I'd just taken the first step towards something I thought was impossible, healing. The trial took 6 months. I didn't attend most of it, didn't need to, and didn't want to, but I followed the coverage, read the transcripts, tracked the progress of the case that would determine whether Daniel would spend the rest of his life in prison. The prosecution painted a picture of a man consumed by narcissism and rage. They called witnesses from his past, the women he'd married and destroyed before me, finally speaking out after decades of silence. They presented evidence of his meticulous planning, his obsession with revenge, his willingness to hire people to commit violence on his behalf. The defense tried to portray him as a broken man, pushed to the edge by circumstances beyond his control. They blamed me, of course, my lawsuit, my success, my refusal to disappear quietly. They suggested that Claire had exaggerated the abuse, that she was trying to save herself by throwing her husband under the bus. Claire testified for 3 days. I watched the video afterward, saw her sit in the witness stand, small and pale, answering questions about the worst years of her life. She didn't cry, didn't flinch, just told the truth in a flat, steady voice that somehow made it more devastating. Yes, he hit her. Yes, he controlled her. Yes, he talked about hurting me. Yes, she had seen the files, the plans, the evidence of his obsession. Yes, she believed he would have killed me if given the chance. The defense attacked her credibility, pointed out her history of lying, reminded the jury that she'd been complicit in my destruction, that she had no moral standing to judge anyone. Claire didn't argue, just acknowledged everything they said, admitted to everything she'd done, and then said, I was wrong, I did terrible things, and I'm trying to make it right. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Guilty, on all counts. I was in my office when the verdict came in. Priya was with me, because she'd been with me through all of this, the ups and downs, the fear and the hope, the long, slow process of justice finally being served. How do you feel? She asked, after I hung up the phone. I thought about it, tried to name the emotion swirling in my chest. Relieved, I said finally, and sad, and tired. Tired is understandable. You've been fighting for years. I know, but it's not just that. I looked out the window. I keep thinking about who Daniel was when I met him, or who I thought he was, this charming, brilliant man who seemed to see something special in me, and I wonder, was any of it real? Was there ever a version of him that wasn't a monster? My therapist said no, Margaret said no, Priya said no, but late at night, alone in my house, I still wondered, had I missed signs I should have seen? Had I enabled his behavior by being too trusting, too devoted, too blind? Was there some flaw in me that made me vulnerable to men like him? Daniel was sentenced to 45 years in prison. He'd be 81 before he was eligible for parole. He looked at me when they read the sentence. Somehow, across the crowded courtroom, he found my face and held it. His expression wasn't rage, wasn't hatred, wasn't anything I expected. It was blank, empty, like something inside him had finally shut down. I didn't look away, held his gaze until the guards led him out, until the doors closed behind him, until he was gone from my life forever. And then I went home, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat in my garden until the stars came out. It was over, all of it. The marriage, the betrayal, the years of destruction, the fight for justice.
over. I should have felt triumphant, should have felt vindicated, should have felt something besides this vast, empty tiredness. But as I sat there in the dark, I realized that endings are rarely what we expect them to be. There's no triumphant music, no sense of closure, no feeling that everything is finally resolved. There's just the silence that comes after, and the question of what to do next. Claire called me the night of the sentencing. "How are you?" she asked. "I don't know. How are you?" "Same." A pause. "Did you see his face when they read the verdict?" "I saw it. He looked empty, like there was nothing left inside him. Maybe there wasn't. Maybe there never was." We were both quiet for a long moment. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, the small sounds of her apartment in the background. It felt strange talking to her like this, like we were actual sisters again, sharing a moment of something like understanding. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what happens now." "What do you mean?" "I mean, the trial's over. Daniel's in prison. The danger is gone." She hesitated. "Do you still want me around, now that you don't need me anymore?" The question cut deeper than she probably intended, because the truth was, I didn't know the answer. Our renewed relationship had been built on crisis, on the shared enemy of Daniel, on the need to work together against him. Now that he's gone, "I don't know," I said honestly. "I think we need to find out whether there's something between us that doesn't depend on trauma. And if there isn't, then at least we'll know." Claire was quiet. Then, "Will you have dinner with me? Not to talk about Daniel or the trial or any of that, just dinner, like normal sisters." I almost said no. The habit of distance was strong, the walls I'd built hard to lower, but something made me pause. "Where?" I asked. "There's a place near me, Italian. It's good." "Saturday?" "Saturday works." Her voice was lighter now, hopeful. "I'll send you the address." After I hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about what I'd just agreed to. Dinner with my sister, a meal with the woman who destroyed my life. It should have felt impossible, absurd, a betrayal of everything I'd been through. But instead, it felt like possibility, like maybe after everything, there was still something worth building. The dinner was awkward at first. We sat across from each other at a small table in the corner of the restaurant, menus in hand, struggling to make conversation that didn't involve court dates or prison sentences. It was like being on a first date with someone you'd known your whole life, familiar and strange at the same time. "The pasta here is really good," Claire said. "You mentioned." "Right, I did." She laughed nervously. "God, this is weird. Very weird. I don't know how to do this, how to just talk to you without the other stuff." I set down my menu, looked across at the table at her. She'd been to therapy, I knew, part of the support system we'd set up for her after Daniel's arrest. She looked healthier than she had that night on my doorstep, less fragile, more like the sister I remembered before everything went wrong. "Tell me something," I said. "Something about your life that has nothing to do with me or Daniel." "Like what?"
Anything. What do you do during the day? What are you interested in? What are you reading? Claire considered the question. "I've been painting," she said finally. "I took it up in therapy. Turns out I'm not terrible." "Really?" "Yeah. Still life mostly. Flowers and fruit, boring stuff. But it helps me think, process things." "I didn't know you were artistic." "Neither did I," she smiled a little sheepishly. "I think I spent so long trying to be you, practical, successful, adult, that I never figured out what I actually liked. Painting is the first thing that's felt like me. Not a version of you, not what someone else wanted me to be. Just me." Something shifted in my chest. A softening I hadn't expected. "I'm glad you found that." "Me too." She picked up her menu again, then set it down. "What about you? What do you do for yourself? Not for work or fighting Daniel or any of that." I opened my mouth to answer, then realized I didn't have one. When was the last time I'd done something purely for myself? Something that wasn't about survival or success or protection? "I don't know," I admitted. "I've been so focused on everything else. I don't think I've had time for just me." "Maybe you should make time." "Maybe." I picked up my wine glass. "Any suggestions?" "Travel. Not for work. Just going somewhere beautiful and doing nothing." "That sounds terrifying." Claire laughed. "That's how you know you need it." We ordered food, ate in a silence that became more comfortable as the meal went on, talked about small things, restaurants, books, the weather. Nothing important, but somehow that was exactly what we needed. Important would come later. For now, this was enough. The next few months became a study in rebuilding. I took Claire's advice, traveled to Japan in the spring, spent 2 weeks wandering through temples and gardens without any agenda at all. It felt foreign at first, the absence of structure, the lack of purpose, but slowly I learned to enjoy it, to sit in a tea house and watch the world go by without calculating what it meant or what I should do next. When I came back, I was different,
lighter, more open to possibilities I'd once dismissed as impossible. Claire and I had dinner every 2 weeks, then every week. We started texting, stupid things at first, memes and links to articles, gradually becoming more personal. She sent me photos of her paintings. I sent her photos of my garden. We talked about our mother, tentatively, neither of us quite ready to address the ways she'd failed us both. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. The wound was still there, would probably always be there, but it was healing, slowly, imperfectly, like scar tissue forming over something that would never quite go away. Margaret watched the transformation with something like approval. "You're learning," she said one evening over dinner at her apartment. "Learning what?" "To let go. To make room for things that don't make sense. To trust yourself again." "I'm not sure I'm there yet." "You're closer than you think," she smiled. "When you first came to me, you were so closed off, so certain that everyone would hurt you. And now look at you, having dinner with the sister who betrayed you, forgiving things you said could never be forgiven." "I haven't forgiven her." "Haven't you?" Margaret raised an eyebrow. "What does forgiveness look like, if not this?" I thought about it. About the dinners and the texts and the slowly building trust. About the way I'd stopped flinching when Claire reached her my hand. About the night last week when she'd called me crying about something unrelated to Daniel, and I'd stayed on the phone with her for 2 hours just listening. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe I'm still figuring that out." That's the secret, about forgiveness. It's not a moment. It's not a decision you make and then it's done. It's a process. Something you choose over and over again, every time the old hurt resurfaces. That sounds exhausting. It can be, but so is carrying the anger. At some point, you have to decide which exhaustion you prefer. I thought about that for a long time after I left, about the choice between anger and forgiveness, about the weight I'd been carrying for years, and what it might feel like to finally set it down. Claire's first art show was in October. It was small, a group exhibition at a community center, nothing fancy, but she'd invited me, and something about the invitation felt important, like a test of sorts, like she was sharing something precious and waiting to see if I treat it with care. I went, stood in a room full of strangers, looking at my sister's paintings, and felt something I hadn't expected. Pride. The paintings were good, really good, colorful and alive with a confidence I'd never seen in her before. She'd found something that was hers, something Daniel couldn't touch, something that had nothing to do with me or our history, and she was putting it out in the world. "What do you think?" she asked, appearing beside me. "I think you're talented." Her face lit up. "Really? Really?" I turned to face her. "I'm proud of you, Claire, for finding this, for putting yourself out there." Her eyes went bright with tears. "That means... God, Mel, you don't know what that means." "I think I do." We stood there, in a room full of art and strangers, and I felt something shift between us. The last of the walls coming down, the final barrier dissolving into something that might have been love. Not the love we'd had before. That was gone, destroyed by what she'd done. But something new, something that acknowledged the past without being trapped by it, something that looked forward instead of back. "Come on," I said, linking our arm through hers. "Let me buy you dinner. We should celebrate." It's been 3 years since Claire showed up on my doorstep in the rain. 3 years since I let her in, despite everything. 3 years of rebuilding, of small steps and setbacks, of learning to trust someone who had hurt me in ways I thought were unforgivable. Green Thread is bigger now, global, actually. I stepped back from day-to-day operations last year, moved into an advisory role that gives me time for other things. The garden, travel, long lunches with friends, the life I thought I'd never have. Claire's painting career has taken off in ways neither of us expected. She had a gallery show in New York last month, sold 3 pieces for prices that made us both laugh with disbelief. She's dating someone new, a woman this time, an art therapist named Sarah, who looks at Claire like she's the most precious thing in the world. I like Sarah. Like the way Claire seems around her, lighter, more herself, less haunted by the ghosts of her past. They had me over for dinner last week, and I caught them dancing in the kitchen while the pasta boiled, laughing at nothing in particular. It made me happy. Genuinely uncomplicated happy. Our mother passed away last spring. Liver failure, the consequence of decades of drinking. Claire and I were both there at the end, sitting on opposite sides of the hospital bed, holding the hands of a woman who had failed us both in countless ways. We didn't talk about forgiveness then. Didn't need to. We just sat together, sisters again, sharing the strange grief of losing a parent who had never quite been the parent we needed. Afterward, Claire moved into a new apartment, one with room for a painting studio, bright and airy and nothing like the dark places she'd lived before. I helped her move in, carried boxes up 3 flights of stairs, argued about where to hang her artwork. "This feels right," she said when we were done. We were sitting on her balcony, watching the sunset over the city. "What's this?" "Sisters. Real sisters." She looked at me. "I know it's not what we were before. I know I can't undo what I did. But this, whatever this is, feels real. Like something worth keeping." I thought about all the years between us. The betrayal, the destruction, the slow, painful work of rebuilding something from the ashes. It is worth keeping. We sat in silence as the sky turned pink, then purple, then dark. The city lights came on below us, a million small fires in the growing night. "Do you think you've forgiven me?" asked Claire eventually. Really, truly forgiven me? I considered the question, searched inside myself for the anger that had once burned so hot, the hurt that had once felt like it would destroy me. It was still there, fainter now, a scar instead of an open wound, but still there, maybe always there. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive you, I said honestly. What you did, it changed me. Changed the way I see the world, the way I trust people. That doesn't go away. Claire nodded. She didn't seem surprised. I understand. But I reached over, took her hand. I've chosen to love you anyway, despite what you did, because you're my sister, and because the person you've become is worth loving. Her hand tightened on mine. Is that enough? I think so. I looked at her. I think that's all any of us can do. Choose love anyway. Keep choosing it, even when it's hard. Even when it hurts. Especially then. The night settled around us, quiet and peaceful. And for the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever, I felt truly at peace. Not because everything was resolved, not because the past had been erased, but because I'd learned to carry it differently, to let it exist alongside the present without consuming it. Daniel was in prison. Claire was painting. I was wealthy and free and surrounded by people who loved me. And somewhere in the wreckage of what had been destroyed, something new had grown. Something tender and imperfect and alive. Something that looked a lot like hope.